going to yeah, what was that? Everyone?
Yeah. The pin. The pin. It was €700.
Who's joining?
Jeremy Reese just
General Pin,
Okay, we're going to begin. We're going to dedicate the shir this evening. Le'ilui Nishmas, the son of the soldiers who was killed yesterday, was Benjamin Yehoshua ben Amnon Yaakov. The reason we're dedicating Le'ilui Nishmas is because there's a family connection for my family. He is the half brother of my first cousin.
Work that out.
Basically, my right. What?
What's his English name?
Yes, Yael. That's right. What was that? English name? Needham. Benjamin Needham. That was his name. Benji Needham. And his half brother. It's not the same. Is my yes, correct. That's a sibling. Half sibling. That's his half sister. It's a half sister. Yeah. So no further Toras. So we are up to Mem Aleph Ahmed. No, Mem Beis. Mem Beis. We did the beginning of the Gemora. We're up to Romile Rabbi Abba Rav Yehuda. Let's just remind ourselves what we're talking about. The Mishnah says, that one of the cases in the Mishnah, the two cases in the Mishnah that we're dealing with is Umnin and Shutfin. So in other words, if the Gemara says that Ummin can't form Chazaka, neither can a Shutaf. What is an Ummin? Ummin is you give your item to someone to fix, or a craftsman or whatever, and the craftsman says, "Oh, it's mine." So obviously it's not yours. He can't claim ownership. It's not right. So that's why Ummin ain't a Chazaka. A Shutaf ain't a Chazaka is slightly more complicated. A Shutaf is I am in a partnership with you, so we jointly own something together. And the din of Shutaf ain't a Chazaka means the Shutaf cannot form a Chazaka against the other Shutaf. Says, you can't start claiming, well, actually, I own it. You sold it to me. You can't do that because the way partners work is that one of you uses the whole land for 3 years, the other one uses it for 3 years, etc., etc. So you can't put a claim of ownership. That is how we understood it in the Mishnah. The point that the Gemara brings a machlokas on is the top of Mem Beis Amud Aleph, or Mem Beis Amud Beis, is a machlokas between Shmuel and Avur the Shmuel and Levi. So Shmuel's father and Levi, the two of them together, who were contemporaries, they said in the Mishnah that a shutaf can't form a chazaka against his partner, and kol shekain an uman, right? Someone who's a craftsman, because he's got no chelik in it at all. He's just doing work for you, right? So it's obvious he can't form a partnership. He can't form a chazaka, right? Whereas a shutaf, there is more of a logical reason to say that he can form a chazaka, because a shutaf, right? What is a shutaf? A shutaf could make a reasonable claim and say, like, yes, we used to jointly own it, and you sold it to me, the other half, right? That's a reasonable thing for Shmuel says no. He says that an uman can't form chazaka, but a shutaf can for this reason, right? Because had he not sold him his part, he should have worked it jointly, eaten the peris b'shutfas. He didn't do that, and therefore he can say, well, from the fact that you didn't use it is a proof that I own it, and you must have sold, and you sold it to me. On that, the Gemara says that Shmuel goes l'tamei. Now Shmuel goes according to his reasoning. Shmuel says, and the Gemara brings 3 dinim that Shmuel says about shutfin, and the Gemara is going to go through each of these dinim. The next, basically, it's basically a blatz, right? A whole daf is going to go through these 3 dinim. We've got something in between as well first, but Shmuel says 3 statements. Number 1, shutfin can form chazaka against each other, right? That's what we're dealing with now. One shouldn't be machzik against the other. That means to say, I can say, yes, we were shutfin, but you sold me your portion, right? You sold me your half, and the proof is I've been here 3 years. You didn't object. The second din is mi'idin zelzeh, which means they can testify one for the other. What does it mean they can testify one for the other? Each one can testify for each other. That means they can be made that in fact it belongs to you. It's a chiddush, because really you would say the negeh be'edus. I'm negeh be'edus. We're joint partners, so I want to testify that it's yours because that's beneficial to me. I'd rather I stay in partnership with you. Yeah, it's all helpful. Nevertheless, they can. And finally, they can be shomer socha one for the other. What does that mean? That means to say, if whilst they are looking after the item or whatever it is, let's say it's an item. I don't know. It's a cow. We jointly own. We own a cow, a shutfus, right? Yeah. So, and something happens to the cow. Now, if I'm considered a shomer sochar, a paid guardian, that means I'm chayev for geneva, right? Chayev for geneva. Shomer chinom is not chayev for geneva. He makes a shvur that he didn't do the wrong thing with it, everything else, and he doesn't have to pay. Yeah. Whereas a shomer sochar has to pay straight out if it's stolen. That's the din. So the chiddush here is that people who jointly own something between them, like a cow, are automatically shomer sochar for each other because I'm paid. How am I paid? In what way am I paid? I'm paid by the fact that you are paying me to look after your animal with the fact that you will look after it for me tomorrow. That's a payment. You understand? I'm looking after the cow, and tomorrow you look after the cow. I'm being paid to look after the cow. How am I being paid? Because tomorrow you're going to look after it. That's a payment. I'm receiving a monetary benefit for looking after for looking after this animal.
Because they'd otherwise have to hire somebody else.
Correct. Or I'd have to look after myself the whole time. So it's a benefit, a tangible benefit. Benefits in kind are recognized in halacha. So it seems, right?
It has a value.
Yeah, it's a benefit in kind.
Or whatever you call it, there's a value in having him looking after your cow.
That's right. Yeah. So therefore, they automatically become shomer sochar. All right. So that's those two second cases we're going to deal with later on. But the first thing the Gemora wants to do is ask a kasha, contradiction. Romani Rabbi Abba Rav Yehuda. Rabbi Abba asked the following contradiction, a question to Rav Yehuda. Ma'arta debei Rav Zakai. Now there are two versions of this word ma'arta. We have the word ma'arta, which means the burial cave of Rav Zakai, or the house of Rav Zakai. The Bach changes to b'ma'atzarta, which is the olive press, I think, of Rav Zakai, which would seem more logical because we don't usually talk Torah in burial caves. What?
We're talking about shituf and chazaka.
Okay. No, not necessarily. No, that was just the location where the shmooze happened. Yeah, we talked in learning. You meet another rabbi, you have a shmooze in halacha, but you can't do this halacha. You know that. If I meet another rabbi, I have to go to a Beis Solom, whatever, for a levai. You're not allowed to sit in a shmooze halacha. It's also loig l'rosh, like you can't show your tzitzis. It's like they're scoffing at the deceased. They can't learn Torah. There are certain rules. There are rules that apply in a Beis HaKbaros. So it's difficult to understand. But if it does mean that, it's a burial cave, because they used to bury in caves, in the walls of the caves, right? Beis Sha'arim. Open to Beis Sha'arim.
What do you mean the walls of the caves?
They used to have burial caves. That's how they used to bury. They used to bury in niches in the wall.
Well, literally in the
The
wall.
family, in the wall. Family, correct. Well, they might in the wall. They might in the ground as well, but the niches in the wall. So the burial in the Gemora in Baba Basra, in the end of the 6th parak, it talks about this Masechta. Got pictures of it, and they say they would have like a family cave, everyone's together, family cave, and niches in the wall, and they bury the mace inside the wall. They did it in Eretz Yisrael. They built it underneath Har HaMenuchos. They built a massive complex. I think. No, I don't know if they're burying there yet. I saw pictures. I've seen it excavated underneath Har HaMenuchos a few years ago. I don't know if they've actually opened it, but they have excavated many layers down now, and they have built layer upon layer upon layer from Mokforim underground, under Har HaMenuchos. And they're wall bearers. They're people in the walls. They're in the wall. I know it sounds funny, but it is the same as burial in karka, in ground.
Get to Rome and get to the crypts.
Yeah. You go to Beis Sha'arim. That's where it is. Beis Sha'arim is a place in it's a national park in Israel, and there you have the kever of Yehuda Hanossi and many others. In that you can visit the caves. I think so. Yeah. What? Pardon?
What's that got to do with the...
Nothing. That's just where. No. This is where the conversation happened. That's all. Now we're going to see what it was. Rabbi Abba asked the questions to Rabbi Yehuda in wherever the location was, either the burial cave or the olive press of Rav Zakai. Miyama Shmuel, does Shmuel say shutaf yesh lechazaka? Does Shmuel in fact say that a shutaf can form a chazaka? Right, a partner can form a chazaka against the other one. V'hama Shmuel. Surely Shmuel said, "Shutuf ki yored b'rashustami." That a shutuf, a partner, is like he enters the field with permission. You're giving him permission to go. It's if I've given you permission to go, right? What does it mean with permission? Basically, like an oris, like a sharecropper. You're going to work the land and you're going to get a certain percentage, etc., etc. That's the assumption. Says the Gemara, Lav lemeimra, does that not mean the shutuf ain't lo chazaka? Does it not mean that a shutuf can't form a chazaka? In other words, the Gemara is assuming that when Shmuel says a shutuf is like a partner in the land, is like he descends into the land with permission. That means the other guy is happy for him to be there. The assumption, what does that mean? That means that he can't form a chazaka because he's there with the other guys giving permission to be there. It's an arrangement. It's not something I can then form chazaka in, right? Now, the question you would ask is, why does Shmuel phrase it in this unusual way? The Gemara will deal with that later. What else he was trying to include with that funny phrase? But either way, it seems to be a contradiction in Shmuel. Did Shmuel say that a shutuf can form a chazaka or not? And the Gemara is going to resolve this by various ways of distinguishing between cases. That sometimes it is a chazaka and sometimes it is not a chazaka. Right? That's how the Gemara is going to answer the question. Silly
question. Is the Gemara not worried about how Shmuel can contradict the Mishnah? So,
why is he contradicting the Mishnah? He taught that he had a different version. Yeah, very good. He had a different version of the Mishnah. Shmuel Tani. Yeah, he had a different version. Yeah, absolutely. You can't contradict the Mishnah. Shmuel's an Amora, but there was a machlokas as to what the girsa in the Mishnah was, what the right text was. So Shmuel said that the text of the Mishnah was just uman eino chazaka. He left out the word shutfin. He didn't have that version in his Mishnah because he found it problematic. So he wasn't arguing the Mishnah. He had a different version of the Mishnah. He didn't have the Mishnah at all. Yeah, that word in the Mishnah, exactly. Yeah, let's see the Rashbam on this. The question. It's about halfway down the narrow lines. V'ha'omar Shmuel shutuf shemachzik b'chol hasoda, a shutuf, yeah, you see it? A shutuf who is machzik in a whole field, gam b'chelko shel chaveroi, also in his friend's part, ki yored b'reshus tomi. It's like he's going there with permission. Koloma, that means to say, ki ilu nosan loy chaveroi reshus. It's like the other guy has given him permission, and he's commanded him to be there in his place. Kedin oris tomi, like an oris, is like the same rule as an oris. Oris, I said, is the sharecropper. A sharecropper is an arrangement where you get a percentage, right? Yeah, you 5% of the fruit, whatever. Lavla maybe says, "Why don't you think?" Yeah, what was that?
Pays percentage of this.
What he takes a percentage, doesn't he? He takes like a percentage, like 50% of the crops or whatever it is. Yeah. Lavla Meimra, don't you think the shutuf ain't lo chazaka? Does not this not mean that shutuf can't form a chazaka? Davi ka'oris yered bereshus. He's like a sharecropper who goes with permission. Or lakachlo have chazaka, and that's why it's chazaka. It's not a chazaka. Lakam Mafarish later on we're going to explain that Kati the Shah Devarim Kama Shmuel yered bereshus Tomi. That still in other respects Shmuel says he's like someone going with permission. Midelo kama behedia shutuf ain't lo chazaka, because he doesn't say explicitly that shutuf doesn't have a chazaka. So this phrase of Shmuel, phrasing it this way, must have a relevance to other dinim as well, which is what the Gemora is going to talk about. So the Gemora says like this. This is the answer. Lo kash. It's no contradiction. Ha denachis lekula. Ha denachis lepalga. One is where he goes into it for all of it, and one is where he goes into it for half. Now, this becomes more problematic because some say the answer is this way round, and some say the answer is that way round. There's two possible ways of resolving this contradiction. Either it is the case that when he goes into the field entirely to work the whole land, that's a proof that he owns it, and when he only goes in partially, that's a proof that he doesn't own it, or vice versa. If he goes into it half, that's a proof that he owns it. Wherever he uses it in full, it's not. Complicated, but there's two different ways of resolving. You see, the Rashbam explains this. Let's see the Rashbam. The nochis lekula. This is the last narrow line. The nochis lekula salit shekanish. So a field they both acquired. That's what we're talking about. He goes into the whole land, or the nochis lepalga. He enters half the land. Bechelek hamuvchar hechzik, in the choicest part, or the chosen, the nicest part, he was machzik. V'omar, he said, cholaknu, we divided it. And this is my bit. And I formed the chazaka in this half for 3 years. Ve'edach toen, and the other one claims, Adain lo chalaknu. What are you talking about? We haven't divided anything. Elakach hisneinu beinenu. This was the condition that we made between us. That you should use that field for this half for 3 years. And I'll use it after you for 3 years. Not all land was created equal. Some land is nicer than other land, right? So you can have a debate over half a field. The question is, who received the nicer part? And that's why you can have a question of chazaka over half a field. Do you understand? The simple case is, I want to form a chazaka over the whole land. That's how we understood it until now, right? The kul, I'm claiming ownership over the whole thing. I owned half, you sold me the other half, and that's my argument. And you say, no, that's not true. But you can have the same debate over one half. And the machlokas is that half mine or not? Did I receive it in a formal division of the land? And I claim that I did. Okay, and remember, both of us want it because it's nicer. And you say, no, you didn't. We never divided it. Yes, you did. Sure, you've been using it for 3 years, but that's because after 3 years, we're going to switch. That's the deal. There's no division. There's no agreement to split formally. We're just going to have a shared arrangement. Make sense?
When is a shtar?
No shtar. 3 years, 3 years, no shtar. Yeah, of course. If there was a shtar, I think then it would all make sense. Now, there might be a shtar shutfus. Yeah, there might be a shtar shutfus, but that's not going to help you because everyone agrees on the facts. We both agree that we were shutfin. We don't debate that, right? You and I both agree, Reuven and both agree, but 15 years ago, we formed a partnership on this land, right? So there's a whole massive piece of land, and we were both going to jointly own it or work it, or however the shutfus arrangement would play out. But there then developed some achlokas, and we jointly paid for it at the beginning. Like I said, we both, right? We jointly paid. But then there developed some achlokas over the fact that one of the two is now claiming he actually owns it. Now, there are two possibilities. Either he's claiming he owns the whole thing, in which case he's basically saying, you sold me the other half, or he's not claiming the whole thing, but he is claiming permanent ownership over the nice juicy bit, and he leaves the part that doesn't have good soil to the other guy. Make sense? Yeah. Right? Now, we haven't resolved which way around is which way around is a successful chazaka and which isn't. Remember, we've got to resolve the contradiction in Shmuel. On one place, Shmuel says he can form chazaka, and one place he can't. So in other words, we're trying to understand, when is the argument of the shutaf a good argument? When is it an argument that will stand up in court? You with me? The facts are clear. Number one fact that is clear is we purchased this field together. You were shutfin. We both agreed to that. Second fact that is clear, you've been using the field for 3 years, or half the field, well, the whole of the half, right? That's also clear. No one debates that either. And I suppose the third fact is that I've got a taina, I've got a claim. My claim is, you sold it to me, or we divided it, and this was the part that I got. So I've fulfilled all my requirements in terms of hilchas chazaka, cheskas gimel shanim. I've done all everything I need to do. The problem is that there is what we call in halacha what's known as a re'esa. Re'esa is always a spoke in the wheel when it comes to assumptions. A re'esa, like the word ra, a re'esa is something negative that calls into question our assumptions. I deal with this all day, based in seriously, because I'll tell you why, right? I do a number of things, but one of the main things I'm doing is checking yichus marriage. Okay, so we have our established procedures for working out who is Jewish, right? Seems like a simple thing. We have a simple procedure. What is the procedure? Procedure is, can we see your parents' ksuba, and can we make sure we link you to your parents? Very simple, right? If I ever have to sign a document for someone going on Aliyah, they have to also, all right, it's like proving they're Jewish, no matter who they are. I don't care if they're, yeah, shares, it makes no difference. So you know, seriously. Even don't get any chasna, we have to see his ksuba. I know it sounds funny, but we still have to see a birth certificate and ksuba. He's the first to present it. You have to see a birth certificate and ksuba. I'm not saying chas v'shalom we thought otherwise, but that is a standard process. That is the process. You have to link people to their parents
to make sure they're Jewish.
Yes. How do you know you're Jewish? Yeah, but I'm saying, I know you know you're Jewish, but how do I know you're Jewish? The only reason I know you're Jewish is I have a document which links you to your parents that proves that's the case. Yes, of course, I could be Makabal Adim. 100% I could have Adim.
You could forge it.
Now you come on to the point I was trying to make. That sometimes you see what's called a reasa. What is a reasa? It's a suspicion. There's something funny going on. So an example of that is, I think I might mention in the past, where there's a big gap between the date of birth and the date of registration, because that can imply an adoption. Because by legally, you have to register birth in 6 weeks of birth, right? Yes, okay, occasionally, sometimes say something a few days out or something like that. Pardon? That's the law, British law. English law.
6 weeks.
6 weeks. Then 6 weeks, register birth, yeah. That's why, the children, knows what you need to do. You have to go and register birth, right? So if there's a big gap, that could imply like 3 months or something, or 4 months. It could imply that what happened was there was another birth certificate, which was the birth certificate, and then the child was legally adopted by someone else, and then they are allowed to apply for another birth certificate, which you're allowed to do. And you can't tell. You can't tell. It says mother, father, you can't tell.
In the new parents.
Yes, that's by law, you can't tell. It's a big problem for us. You can't tell the birth certificate that your child was adopted. It's a new birth certificate. And they present that when they want to get married. So that's a problem, because what if they're adopted, they're trying to hide it. Most people don't do that, try and hide things, but it can happen. So if we see something like that, we have to do more investigation.
Find the original certificate.
You can always find the original certificate. You just have to apply to the government registry office and apply for the original birth certificate. But if they've been adopted al pi halacha, that means to say we've done the gerus, or most people who adopt al pi halacha, they go through processes, right? They come to the Beis Din, and then the Beis Din confirm that the child's Jewish. If they adopt someone, want to adopt a Jewish child, if necessary, they'll do gerus, right? Assuming the circumstances permit it, etc., whatever it is, right? There are adoption procedures, but in the file we will see the original certificate. So I've had couples before in front of me where they presented a birth certificate, and let's say we knew it was an adoption case, and since the adoption of the parent, not their own, it can be the adoption of the parent, right? And I can go back to the file and I can see the birth certificate that they've never seen the child. Do you understand? Because it was the birth certificate that was originally submitted 30 years ago when the child was adopted. They don't need to see it. We needed to see it at the time. And a copy would have been kept on file of the original birth certificate, so we can check that the mother was Jewish. Because it happens, some people, they have a child and under difficult circumstances, whatever it could have been, right? It could be young love, unexpected, whatever it was, yeah? They give the child up for adoption. The child could be 100% Jewish. It could be a Jewish mother. You get it? What? So that's a risk.
To the Ketubah, when the Ketubah says, Moshe Mebed Chaim Shimon and Alisa Yafa Bas, that's not going to be what's on the birth certificate. The birth certificate is going to say Martin Meir Kander and Alisa.
Oh, fine. So no. That's a good question. If the marriage was through us, we will have all the records. So we will link the Ketubah to the original, the names or whatever. And I'm in regular contact with all the other authorities in the country, the union and the federation and the S&P, and I usually go back to them and I will say track the names and whatever. Sometimes you can tell the names. So some of the Sfardim put the surnames in the Ketubah. So it's not, sometimes you can actually see the names from the Ketubah itself. But the same in Israel, you get the Tudat Nisuin from Israel, which is the marriage certificate, and then I'm giving you, it's a little bit into, there's all different ways it plays out. So here, why is that relevant to here? The answer is because here we have everything which seems to be fine. The problem is there's a rare, so there's something that makes us question it, and that is the fact that you're shutfin. Yeah. Because you're shutfin, that is a spanner in the works for your claim for ownership. And the question is, when does your claim stand up despite the shutfus arrangement, and when does it collapse? So the Gemora says, right, let's carry on our shpam. So some say this way around. Yesh b'taratzim b'inyan zeh. Some explain in this way. Hold on a Shmuel shutuf. In other words, they resolve the contradiction of this. Hold on a Shmuel shutuf yesh l'chazaka. That which Shmuel said that a partner can form a chazaka. D'nochis l'kula. That's when he goes into the entire property. The minak shutfim little b'shutfus peiros kol shana v'shana, because the custom of shutfim is to take in partnership the fruit of every single year. Or this one takes half the land, and this one the other half of the land. Right? And the next year they switch. That which this one used half the land last year, right? This one will take this year. Because everyone wants to benefit every year from his portion of the land. And therefore, if you let your friend use the land, be machzik in the land by himself for 3 years, that is a proof that he definitely sold his portion to you. The hilch therefore have a chazaka, and therefore it's a chazaka. So in other words, what we're saying is, when it's nochis lekula, when Shmuel said the shul perform a chazaka, that is when he does something which directly goes against the way shutfim behave. And that means he used the whole property, because shutfim don't do that. Shutfim are partners. They have various arrangements for sharing the land. Either we divide the fruit from all the land, or I use half the land, you use half the land 1 year, then we switch the land, or whatever the arrangement is. You with me? So therefore, that's why that's a good chazaka if he uses all the land. And when the Shmuel says not a chazaka, when he only uses half the land, they change it around a bit. And the other one uses the other half, 3 years or 4. And then they switch, they do the reverse in the same arrangement the next 4 years. You understand? So when the Shmuel says it's not a chazaka, when you only consume half the property. And even if, and that means I'm claiming that I own half the land. And why do I want that? Because it's the nicer part, right? And I say, we split it. This was my fair deal. That's what I got, right? No, Shmuel says that's not chazaka. You know why? Because that's a normal arrangement that shutfin have. That one uses half the land for 3 or 4 years, and then the other one uses the other half for 3 or 4 years. So you understand? So the first way we've resolved it.
Then what's happening to the other half during those first 3-4 years?
The other one's using it. They just take it in turn. So
different parts of the land.
No, half each. So I use half for 3 years, and you use half for 3 years, and then we switch. And that's why I can't form a chazaka on half the land, because it's normal shutfus behavior. Again, it's a bit counterintuitive. To form chazaka, I have to go against shutfus behavior, because otherwise, that then I've got a proof. Because then I'm saying, why didn't you make an object? Why didn't you object? I was clearly not acting like a shutuf. So according to the first way we resolved it, we said like this: when the Shmuel say that shutuf can form a chazaka, when I use the whole property, because if I use the whole property, no shutuf is going to take that line down. They're going to object. They're going to cause a fuss. Shutufim don't behave like that. They don't let one of the partners use the whole property for 3 years. That's like bizarre behavior for shutufim. And therefore, that's why if I did that and you didn't object, it's a proof it's mine, and you sold it. You know. But if I'm using half the land, right? Even if it's half 3 years and you didn't say a word, that's not proof that I own it, because shutufim sometimes come to that arrangement that I'm going to use it for half the land. I'm going to use half the land for 3 years. You're going to use half the land for 3 years. Everyone make sense? Yeah. So that's the first resolution. That's that way around. That's the lahai gisa. That's that way around. This is how you resolve the contradiction. But the omri law next Rashbam lahai gisa. Some say that the resolution is the reverse. Where he uses the whole property, that's not a chazaka. Because this is the minhag of partners to use the field for 3 complete years. That's what they do. They use the land for 3 years. Therefore, he's not able to claim that your portion I bought, it was purchased. He's not able to do it, right? He's not able to say that. He's not able to say that your portion was purchased. Because people do this. But where he uses half the land, have your chazaka is a chazaka. This svarhu dechalku, because it's logical that they did divide. Because if it was the case that he was happy to benefit from his portion every year, and not to wait 3 or 4 years after his friend, like the minhag that partners normally have, he should not have chosen one portion alone. They should have used it jointly, and split the fruit. So in other words, what Rashbam is saying is like this: He's saying that where we use the property I've gone into property entirely, I can never claim it's mine. Because Shutfin sometimes do that, according to this way of looking at it, right? They use the land for 3 years and then the other guy uses it for 3 years. But if I only use half the land, then that is a proof that indeed I own, and we split it formally, and that's the bit that I owe. Why? Because if it was the case that we're going into a shared arrangement, this is not how we would have shared it. We would not have shared it like this, right? Because he would not have just used one half. That's just not how they would do things. They would work the land jointly and then divide the total produce of the land. In other words, according to this way of resolving the contradiction, we're saying that normal behavior for Shutfin is either that one partner uses all the property for 3 years and then the other guy uses it for 3 years. That's normal behavior. And therefore, if you can't claim ownership for using all the land for 3 years, because that's normal. That's normal. That's a normal way they operate. You can have it 3 years and I'll have it 3 years after you, right? Another possibility of normal behavior is we both work the land jointly or whatever, or maybe I do this, you do that, and then we split the fruit of the whole land. But what is abnormal Shutfus behavior is for one partner to stick for 3 years to half the land. That is not normal.
What does that show?
You either option A or option B. Shutfus behavior is either option A, which means I use all land 3 years, then you use all land 3 years, or we do it jointly together or whatever, and we split the fruit after we whatever, right? But to do like just one of us to work half the land, that is a strong sign. That's abnormal, and therefore that's a strong sign that in fact we came to a formal separation, and therefore it's a proof I own it. Yeah.
So you mean proves that he sold the other half, and he's only using
Not necessarily sold. It's a proof that we made a formal division, and this is now my half. Yeah.
He's only using that half of the other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. He's only using that half, and the other guy's using the other half, or he was to claim that.
He doesn't need to make an objection because it's his anyway.
No, he doesn't. The other guy should have objected. That's the point, and he didn't object. No. One second. I'm using half the land, and I work half the land for 3 years, and no one said the word. At the end of 3 years, you come along and say, "Yeah, I didn't say a word because you only used half the land." So we're Shutfin, and you used half the land. That's perfectly reasonable. No, it's not, because that's not normal behavior for Shutfin.
Less.
No, that's just not normal behavior, and therefore the fact that you did behave like that, worked half the land and stuck to half the land, is a proof that in fact we came to a formal decision to split. So we're no longer Shutfin. I get half the land and you get half the land, and therefore that's a proof that I own it. The part of the half I'm in. Yeah.
So David's point, unless, which means that if you're the other shutuf, then you need to do something to make sure that your partner doesn't try.
Correct. You would have done that's the point. You would have said something. The fact that you didn't means actually you're just trying to put a fast one now. And really, this was at the end. There was an ending to our relationship. Okay, so this is the first sort of one way or two ways of resolving the contradiction. Back to the Gemara. Ravina has another solution. He says no. Both scenarios of Shmuel, when he says you can form a chazaka and you can't, are talking about where you entered, the guy is working the whole property. Below kasha. There's no contradiction. Not all fields are created equal. Some fields have what's called a din chalukah, and some do not have a din chalukah. Now, we learned this in the first parak. A din chalukah is where we jointly own something, but I can force you to split. When can I force you to split? When there's a minimum of 4 amos each. So let's say we jointly own a courtyard, a chotzer. So I've got a house on one side of the courtyard, and you've got a house on the other side. And until now, things have been very happy, and we've shared the land, and the kids play together, everyone's happy. But one day I'll come along and say, I don't want this anymore. I want my privacy, I want to split. What does it mean I want to split? I get half and you get half. I can only force that on you if there is a din chalukah. And din chalukah means that there's sufficient land for both me and you to have a nice life. Because if you have a shared space, that's a tiny patch of land, that's less than 8 amos in total, then it's useless for both of us. Do you understand? It's like if you have a block of flats and they have a shared courtyard in the middle of the block of flats, right? So in theory, it might be nice, right, to divide that land amongst, I don't know, the 100 houses, your high-rise block of high-rise tower, right? So you've got a lovely garden outside, beautiful big garden. So divide it between 100 flats. No one's going to do that. Why? Because
It's meaningless.
yeah, you're going to put lots of little fences, and we're just going to get a tiny sliver, and it's all going to be very nice in theory. I mean, we're English. We probably would like that.
That's
To be
a lot.
honest. In England, no, because we like our own.
Yeah, that is a lot.
We like our own space. Allotment's a bit different because allotments is like I want to grow 3 potatoes. All I need is a space for 3 potatoes. The narrow strips of land, but they're made for growing things.
Yeah.
You have to remember that we're generally talking about the chotz as a living space. It's like another part of the room. They used to cook there. They used to, you know, it's another room. It's another room. Even today, you go to a hot country, you know Israel, a mirpeset or a garden is another room. You spend a lot of time out there. It's not like us shivering away here, venturing the garden for 2 months. You know what I mean, right? So this is how it is, yeah. So the Gemora says that's how it is. So that's Ravina's resolution. That in a situation where there is a din chalukah, then we can say that it's well. We'll say this. Trying to explain it. There's 4 amas for each of them, plenty of space. It's a chazaka. Since there's sufficient for each of us, 4 amas for me, 4 amas for you, it is not the accepted practice to allow someone to use the whole land for 3 years, unless he sold him his portion. Because it's not that these people, it's a bit confusing. We're not dividing up. Din chalukah is relevant normally, like I explained it, where where I can I force you or not to divide, and that's what we talked about in the first parak. Can I force you, right? Here we're not talking about anyone forcing anyone else. Here we're simply saying the norms of behavior with partners differ depending on the size of the land. That's all we're saying. If it's got din chalukah, that means it's farmers for me and farmers for you. The normal way of behaving with that land is me to use half and you to use half. That's normal behavior. Because why wouldn't we do that? We've each got space and we're sharing this property and you use half and I use half, right? And therefore, if I use the whole land for 3 years, that's a proof that you indeed sold it to me. Because since we've each got plenty of space, you would never do that normally. You would never let me use it all unless I bought it. Make sense? Yeah? But less but in chalukah, the other scenario where it's not a chazaka, so there's not a chazaka, is where there's no din chalukah. Ain't a chazaka, there's no chazaka. The Hossam said to Rashbam, minug hulechol zeh sholish arba shonim shleimus kol hasoda. There the minig is for each of them to use the land for 3 or 4 complete years, the entire field. And then the other guy, because both of them together, it's just not worth it. You follow? If the land is too small, the norms of behavior for Shutfin is, I'll use all the land for 3 years, and then you use it for 3 years. Fun? It's not worth it any other way. And therefore, if I come along and say, hey, you sold it to me, I'm saying, what are you talking about? I didn't sell it to you. We're using like normally as we would normally use land, which is you use 3, and I use 3. Makes sense? The Rashbam says this is how we paskin, like the resolution of Ravina. That means to say, in a situation where you have, in other words, the question of whether or not a partner can form a chazaka against the other guy is dependent on the question of, is it a chotza sheyesh b'din chalukah or ein b'din chalukah? The case is that I use all of the land for 3 years. At the end of 3 years, I come along and say, I've got a chazaka. No one objected. I've got no shtar. It's been 3 years. No one objected. You sold it to me. 3 years ago, you sold it to me. Yeah? And the halacha is that if the land is small, so that there's no space for both of us to work, then I can't form chazaka, because then you can legitimately turn around to me and say, yeah, of course you use it for 3 years, but then I'm going to use it for 3 years. That's the whole arrangement, because it's not worth using it any other way. Whereas if it's big land, there was plenty of space, it's a good proof that in fact, right? It's a good proof that in fact I own it, because you would never let me use the whole land. you would have each used half, right? The Rashbam goes in a bit of a divergent tangent now and asks a question from a case that we had on Daf Chof Tesam with base. There was a case of Rami Bar Chama and Ravuk Bar Chama, the Zovan Amor Saba Shutfas. They purchased a maidservant in Shutfas, as you do. They jointly purchased a maidservant. One of them used the maidservant services in years 1 and 3, and the other one used it years 2 and 4. They used it 1 year each. And we explained that the reason is why did they each use it 1 year? So that the other guy couldn't form a chazaka. So the Rashbam's question is obvious. Why not? Sometimes shutfin can.
Yeah,
But only when. Well, they were worried that neither of us should form a chazaka. When is shutfin able to form a chazaka?
when we've got the entirety of something.
When no.
We've got all the land.
Yeah, but only when. Remember, we're going with Ravina.
Abnormal with the use of.
But more than that, only when there is a din chalukah, where there is the possibility of splitting. That's what we just said according to Ravina. In other words, you can't split a woman in half. So in other words, there's no possibility of splitting a maidservant in half. And therefore there's no chashash that the other guy could say, hey, she's mine. 3 years she's been working for me. She's been cleaning the floor for 3 years. Obviously she's mine. No, what do you mean? It's not proof at all. We couldn't do it any other way, so we came to this arrangement. Right? It's only a proof if there was another way of doing it, like land, that you could use 4 amos and I could use 4 amos. So Rashbam says, in reality, even if each one used it for 3 years in a go, it wouldn't be chazaka. Because there's no possibility of splitting one maidservant. So therefore you can't form a chazaka because I can't split it, right? Because therefore it wouldn't be a chazaka. And the reason why they were only machzik in her alternate years, because they were worried that maybe the Eidim would not know at the end of 3 years that she was in fact originally purchased jointly. And they were worried that the one who was machzik in her might claim she'einu shutuf, that he was not a shutuf, and his chazaka might be a chazaka. So this comes back to, Martin, the point you mentioned before, where you said you were confused about where's the shtar in all this, right? So really, until now, we've been assuming, basically, there are 2 potential shtaras floating around here. There's a shtar that we originally joined as shutfin. There's another shtar that I'm claiming was lost, which was, I bought you out. That's the second shtar, okay? The Rashbam is saying the reason why those 2 Amiroim ensured they each used it 1 year, because they were worried that the first shtar, that means the shtar shutfus, might be lost. And if the shtar shutfus is lost, the other one is going to come along and say, hey, she's mine. I mean, a separate question why 2 Amiroim are worried that they're going to claim that against each other. Although there's a simple answer to that. What? Yeah, no, and also Isam Nakim. You need to do something, you need to do and be seen to do something which is above potential suspicion. So you put something in place at the beginning that preempts. There's Lifneiver as well. You don't want to put set up a situation where there's a possibility for someone to claim something. Yeah. Lo masha notel. Yeah. Yeah, there's a famous quote, I can't remember who it's for. The first thing is don't be a fool. Like you've got to be going to business arrangement with your eyes open. It doesn't matter who's involved. You've got to be sensible. Okay, fine. Let's see now. Gufa. Let's finish the piece of Gemara. Gufa, the Gemara says, Omar Shmuel. We said that Shmuel says Shutaf Kiyered Birshustami. So we've resolved the contradiction, but now we just got to deal with this funny phrase. Shmuel says Shutaf Kiyered Birshustami. Shutaf is like someone who goes into the field with permission. Micah Mashmalon. What's he coming to tell us? Shutaf ain't a chazaka. That's what it means. We just said that. Going permission means a shutaf can't form a chazaka, right? So if so, yeah, lema shutaf ain't a chazaka. Why is he doing this grand statement like as if he's going with permission? Just say shutaf ain't a chazaka, right? Just say those words. Shutaf can't form a chazaka. No, the reason why he says this phrase is he's coming to tell us another din. Loma to say shenotel b'shvach hamagia leksofim, that he can take he takes in shvach hamagia leksofim. What does that mean? He takes the shvach hamagia leksofim, improvements that reach shoulder height. We'll see what that means. V'soda she'eina asuyalita, in a field which is not normally planted, kasoda asuyalita, like a field that is planted. So that's very confusing. Basically, we're saying there's another reason in which respect of which he's like going in with permission. And the Rashbam will explain this. Loma last Rashbam on the page, Loma shenotel. This means to say that he takes kedin oris, like a sharecropper, sheyored birashus, who descends into a field with permission. In other words, starts working a field with permission. Afilu, even b'shvach hamagia leksofim, even with improvements to the crops that reach shoulder height. That phrase means gemar peri. It means fully grown crops. You're going, for example, koma likto, let's say crops ready to harvest, va'anovim livtzar, or grapes ready to harvest. Notel kol achatzi, takes the whole half. Gedin arisei ho'ir. He takes the whole half, like the same halacha, the same din as sharecroppers in a city. Right? Va'afilu sodesh eino osilita, even if it's a field that's not normally planted, elolizria, it's only used for sowing, and it's not used for planting. What's it called? Like well, I think it means crops or whatever. It's not planting trees, for example, or crops. It's just used for sowing seeds. V'notahu, and he planted it. Notel kol dino. He takes all his entitlement, ki'ilu osuilita, as if it was a field that was made for that purpose. Some fields are made for sowing seeds, and some are made for planting trees. And he takes the whole, everything he's entitled to, as if it was made for the purpose of planting trees. Kedina yurid besod, kedina yurid birashus. Like the halacha of someone who enters a field with permission. Because there's a difference between someone who is given permission to work in a field and someone who isn't, right? There's something called Yered Birashus and Yered Shalei Birashus. What does that mean? You own a field, and you could give me permission to work your land. That's fine. That's a sharecropper, right? You can work. Please say to me, I haven't got time to plow. You've got time to plow. Please plow, grow the crops, everything else, and then you get 50% of the food, right? There's another din, which is a Yered Shalei Birashus. Yered Shalei Birashus is, well, you own a field, and I feel like I'd like to grow some crops on your land. I didn't ask permission. I just decided to do it. And now I turn around to you and say, excuse me, I'd like 50%, please. And you
the entire produce,
or whatever the arrangement is. I don't claim more than normal sharecroppers get in the play. We're different in towns, we're different in Hogim. No, I'm not claiming more, but I want my fair share. You turn around to me and say, thank you very much, sir. I never asked you to do this. However, that is not so simple, because undoubtedly your actions help you. You've now got beautiful apples. You understand? So there has to be a middle of the road. With Yered Shalei Birashus, we face an interesting conundrum. Our simple response to a Yered Shalei Birashus, someone who plants someone's field without permission, is to say, go home, go away, get lost. I never asked you to do this. The problem is that's manifestly unjust. Why? Because what are you going to do? You're going to walk away with all my hard work. Well, I'm not going to get anything for it. Like you're just going to. I decided to invest a huge amount. Yeah, okay. You could say, well, it's your problem. It's not my problem. You decided to plant my field, right? But we don't say that. We say that he does get something. The ilu yered shalei birashus. The halacha is that someone who goes into someone's field without permission, shtomin lo. The halacha is that we evaluate the field or what's taken place. We evaluate it. The yodei ala tachtona. So we evaluate the improvements he's made. Let's say the value of what he's grown, and he gets the lesser of the two, as follows. If the improvement he's made, let's say the value of the crops, right, compared to what he put in, is more than the expenditure, what does he get? No telas. He takes the lower value. He takes the expenditure. You understand? Let's say he planted beautiful trees and apples and everything else, and that's worth 10 times more than the money he spent on the seeds or whatever it was, the apple trees. The halacha is he only gets the value of his expenses. That's all he gets, right? Sometimes it can be the reverse. It could be that the expenditure is more than the shvach, is more than the improvements. It could be you did a very bad job of planting. That's why no one else employed you because you weren't good at it, and therefore, yeah, you made a loss. Okay. Then in that case, you take the expenditure, right? The amount of expenses which equates to the share of in the profit. That means to say you don't get your full expenses. You get the expenses up to how much you actually improve the field. You understand? That's what you get. So that's called Yoda ala Tachtona. You get whatever's less, either the expenses or the shvach if that's less than you. As we say all this above Matzia and Ashel, person who goes in someone's field and plants it without permission. Rav says, you evaluate it, how much it's worth. Yoda ala Tachtona gets the lower amount. Shmuel says differently there. He says, he says you evaluate how much a person will want to give for this field in order to have it planted. You know, a person might want to pay £100 to get it planted or whatever. That's how much he gets. But Omar Papa says, Loi pligi. There's no machlokas in Rav and Shmuel. Kan b'soda asuya lita, kan b'soda she'ein asuya lita. It depends. If it's a field that's normally planted, then what? The halacha is, you get then you get Yod ala Tachton, I think, right? Then you get the shvach or the yitzia or whatever it was, because the field is normally planted. Here, in Shmuel's case, if it's a field, Shmuel's talking about a scenario where it's a field that's not normally planted. In a scenario where a field is not normally planted, okay, you don't get the whole amount. You don't get the whole amount, right? If it's not normally planted, you just get how much you estimate how much a person would want to give for this field to be planted, however much that is. Yeah, it might not be very much. He might agree to pay a certain amount to have it planted because it's a great deal, for example, right? So that's how it is. No, I think I must be the other way around. Sorry. Shmuel must say, it must be the other way around. Sorry, Shmuel is saying you get the full amount, no? I think Shmuel is saying you get the full amount. You don't think so? I think if it's normally planted, what? If it's normally planted, then that's the amount that you should get. If it's normally planted, one second. Shmuel says, yeah. So I think it doesn't spell it out clearly, but it must be that way around. I think what we're saying is like this, that in the case where it's a field that's not normally planted, then we say Shomin lo Yod ala Tachtona, and he gets a lower amount. If it's a field that is normally planted, right, then we estimate how much a person would want to pay for the field to be planted, and he gets whatever he would normally give. That's how much he has to pay him.
It's quite favorable to the planter.
Yes, the planter, because it's a normally planted field. If it's a normally planted field, if this is a field which normally I put trees in, then you've done what I want to do.
There's no penalty for him.
No, why should there be a penalty? You normally put. What do you mean? This is a field for trees.
Yes.
It's a field that is used for trees. So I've done what you want.
You didn't ask for it.
So what? So what? I've done what you wanted. Why? If it's a field designated for trees, that's the job. That's the job. So I've done what you want. Now, this is how it is when it applies to someone who enters the field without permission, right? The din we're saying here is for hocha over here. Choshev lahai shutav ki yored b'reshus. Last three lines. We consider this partner as if he is entering a field with permission. That's what we do. The hilchah, therefore, shokil b'soda she'ena asuya lita. Therefore, because we consider him as if he's entering with permission, because he's a partner, and that's what Shmuel meant when he said Ki yored b'rishus Domi. He's like he goes with permission, and therefore he takes in a field which is not normally planted, like a field that's normally planted. Right? Shmuel just said a shlukanam chazaka. I would have said I would have said, well, if he plants it, the whole field, then he only gets the lower amount. Since he entered without his friend's permission. You see clearly in the Rosh Hashanah that's the way around, yeah? In other words, the assumption normally would have been, I didn't ask you to plant the field. And therefore, in a case where it's not normally planted, but it's sown with seeds, you're only going to get the expenses or the shvach, whatever's less. So Shmuel comes along and tells us, no, a shutuf is ki yored b'rishus. A shutuf, by definition, is assumed to be someone who's got permission to plant. And therefore, even if it's a field that is not normally planted with trees, right? But it's using the seeds. You get the full whack. You get the normal value that sharecroppers get, whatever the going rate is. It might be 40%, it might be 30%, whatever it is. That's the deal, okay? And that's why Shmuel said the din of shutuf is ki yored b'rishus. It's like something. You see, that's what I meant. Rabbi Birnbaum says, loima to say, shenoto b'shvacha magia leksofim. He takes in the improvement. That means to say, fully grown crops. That means even the fully grown crops, yeah, right? Even if it's a field which is not normally planted with trees, it's sown with seeds. You take kasada hasulita. You take the full percentage as if it's normally treated that way, which is not the same as someone who enters shalom brishus. They can't get that. So Mitzvah will carry on next week. I'm assuming Asum will share next week. Is there any reason not to? We should ask them. Pardon? Oh yes, I am, and it's Hanukkah. You're right. I've got to go to that. No, but it doesn't necessarily mean I can't. No, in the shul. You're right. I forgot about that. What? Is it? Okay, then it probably won't be able to then. No. All right. Okay. All right. We'll be in touch. We'll explain. We'll put it on the group. All right.